Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So as soon as I started my stream today, I immediately got quite many questions about what is my predicted team to be bringing in Abyss of Legends as soon as it comes out, and basically which are going to be my initial champion selections. So obviously a lot of that is going to depend when we get the map and what kind of idea we have on the fights, but assuming that I'm going in blind and I don't have any idea whatsoever which champions I'm going to be facing, I obviously do have like my top picks or the base idea of what is going to be needed and who am I going to rely the most on. So the main kind of like information that we know about Abyss of Legends is that most of the opponents have 6 million health. Now I actually think that those will not be most of the opponents. I actually think, just like in Labyrinth of Legends, we're going to have 3 million health pool and we're going to have 6 million health pool in Abyss, and Labyrinth obviously had 1.5 and 3.3 millions. So I think that we only actually got these abilities from the champions that, just like in Labyrinth, have some extra stuff added to them. I expect there to be another whole chunk of champions with 3 million health, with no special kind of like Labyrinth nodes, if you will. So that is what I kind of expect. Why I expect it? Because I don't believe Kabam has left any shred of originality, and they're essentially kind of ripping off Labyrinth set of, for most part, when it comes to rewards and when it's going to come to the fights themselves. So I do kind of like make a prediction of there being a whole bunch of other fights that we have not had yet revealed for us that will have 3 million health. That being said, the base champions, for most part, Aegon is definitely my first and go-to option. So the other thing to note about Aegon and many different champions when you bring in, there is likely going to be that 240 hit limit kind of cap thing, and that means as soon as that's finished we're going to be dead. So you're going to have basically 240 hits in the fight to get through a fight, and then you're going to have to revive. But as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really change too much when you're using Aegon, especially Aegon, because you can still proceed throughout these fights. Just obviously you're going to have to revive every 240 hits, but also Aegon can be played slightly differently, triggering those extra furies while getting hit slightly more often, and you can kind of like make good use of the fact that you're gonna die in 240 hits nonetheless. Therefore you can take these extra hits with Aegon to do extra damage meanwhile, and if you run out of health when opponents are, well, when you have 230 hits already done in the fight, then you kind of still get that extra reach with Aegon with extra damage. So Aegon is going to be my number one team selection. So actually I'm going to go to like a random quest and we're going to bring in the champions one by one. So if I pop in here, I'm going to edit my team, and then I'm going to select Aegon as the first one, because I do believe that Aegon's still going to do fantastic. I do believe that he's going to put in a great amount of work, and even though you're going to have to revive him more than you would normally like to or would have to, I think he's still going to be one of the MVPs. So once Aegon is aside, another champion obviously I have my looks on is going to be Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom does seem to have quite many of the necessary qualifications needed for the problem enigmatic fights. Now obviously it's not exactly because of his damage output, and any fight where you need to use Dr. Doom is likely going to involve you reviving, I don't know, 5 times or more or whatever, whilst you cover that 6 million health. But at the same time, many of the trickier fights seem that they will kind of like help Dr. Doom quite substantially, because he's going to be able to dance in between those 2 to 3 bars of power control opponents, and kind of force his own game on opponents. And there's also a Captain Marvel movie. If you happen to run in her, the Mystic Champion is going to be like a really good answer by striking her block, giving her those charges. You're also going to be dealing a huge amount of extra damage, because I do suspect it will scale up with the health pool. So yeah, so basically it's Aegon and Dr. Doom. Now aside from that, when going in blind, I do believe that where is Human Torch? Human Torch seems to be an answer to quite few of the fights. The fights where opponents gain some random heal for million, or like dead pulls or whatever else, and quite a lot of them also involve the fact that they can be heal blocked or they are immune to petrify effects or stuff like that. Although I'm still sure that Void will do kind of like a fantastic job in many of those situations, but if opponent's immune to petrify, you can't reverse that healing and you can struggle quite a bit. And all of that being said, I do think that yeah, Human Torch potentially has some really good, interesting uses, because those are Incinerate debuffs, because they can still reverse the regen, because none of the mentioned champions with healing abilities had anything about regeneration, or we didn't see like Lionheart mechanic mentioned or anything of the sort. So Human Torch is also likely to be on my team, but only kind of for situations where it calls for it, where it's needed. Obviously, if we will have a map, then he wouldn't be a champion you bring in for every lane, just like Dr. Doom, but you don't know what you're going to run in it. So if you're going in blind, then I'm likely going to take Human Torch with me. And then I have a few more champions that I definitely will try to use. One of them is going to be Guillotine 2099. Now, the problem with Guillotine 2099, obviously, is the fact that she cannot reach 6 million health pool in 240 hits. And if you cannot do that, then the next fight, you're basically going to have to start all over from beginning as well, and you can't have that 100 combo meter, which is going to be extremely inconvenient. Therefore, my idea, at least in my head so far, is to use Aegon for the first half or first 60% of the champions, and then bring in Guillotine 2099 to hopefully kind of like one-shot whatever is remaining, whatever her actual reach is going to be within 240 hits. And then you're also going to be able to finish the fight with level 3, have her 100 hit combo for the next fight. And then again, you can do the same thing. You can go in with Aegon, you can finish up the fight, die a couple of times, leave opponent like 40% health or whatever, and then you can bring in Guillotine 2099 to finish out the fight. And because Guillotine 2099 will have slightly longer reach than Aegon does, for sure, because she can finish out the fights in less hits overall. So I do believe that, yeah, Guillotine is going to be good to finish off the fights. Plus, there will be some fights where bleed immunity is necessary, or maybe some other abilities that Guillotine possesses. So it's going to be a good second option for a high damage dealing champion to bring in majority of situations. So I think that is my first kind of like set 4 champions. Couple more things before we kind of like finalize, because the last spot I'm not too certain about right now. I might take out one of these champions for Quake and Nick Fury. With Quake, the 6 million health is a problem, but you could kind of work around it, like, because potentially she could be the answer for a really big problem fight. And even though it would take some revives to get the 6 million health down, it's not undoable. But before I go in Abyss of Legends, I definitely will test out how viable she's going to be in general, how well she is going to work around those nodes that are there, and whether how long you can last using Quake. Now in Labyrinth, I have soloed 1.5 million opponents in past, like Unstoppable Colossuses, Magics, and stuff like that. So it's not really the 6 million health issue. Obviously, it's going to take a huge amount of time and it's going to be a big hassle, but it might be worth it if she can carry out her game plan and if there are some really, really tricky fights to do. But I might obviously opt not bringing her in. Nick Fury, however, is a fairly realistic candidate to bring in my opinion. Where is Nick Fury? Well, we're going to find one. We should have to. Yeah, so Nick Fury is also a fairly realistic candidate to bring in. It's because his damage output is great. He can bypass miss, he can bypass evade, and he can be fully unblockable. So in fights where you kind of have to rely on damage over time effects, and you need that kind of like ability to bypass this evade and so on and so forth, he might be extremely useful as well, because there are quite many kind of like good redeeming qualities, and plus bringing him in, all your hero champions gain some extra attack in itself. So going in blind, I don't know if that's gonna be my go-to strategy, but when you're doing a run throughout and later on when you have a map, I think he's definitely going to be a really important piece for you to bring with you, depending how many champions you kind of need to cover the entire lane. And the last option is Ghost, because Ghost is kind of like a universal answer to majority of damage over time debuffs and many of those fights. Obviously also the fact that she can phase and she can find easy openings and do a good amount of damage is extremely useful. Now I'm sure there will be many champions who just bring in Ghost flat out and go in and fully synergize her up. Now I definitely will not do that. I don't want to bring in like Hood. Wasp might actually be quite decent option to bring in, potentially. I'll think about it a bit more, but if I take her for my initial run, I'm much more likely to bring her in without the synergies and then kind of like figure out what works for me. So these have been kind of like my most likely suspects initially. Yeah, basically you can see Aegon, Dr. Doom, Human Torch, Guillotine, Ghost. So I think that is what I'm going to go in with. Or instead of Ghost, it could potentially be Nick Fury, or it could potentially be Quake. And that pretty much does it. That is my initial team setup. Obviously these teams will change heavily if we get like a full map of exploration and we know exactly what we're going to face and what are the best counters for which fight. But this is probably going to be kind of my shooting in the dark blind team, if you know what I mean. So we're going to see how that works out, how well it works out against like Collector and all the other fights. And it is actually a very interesting time right now, because it's been a long time when I was actually somewhat concerned about the content and my ability to complete it. Even when 6.2 came out, when 6.3 came out, it was kind of like, yeah, whatever, I'll just bring in some champions, see what's there, and I'm sure it's gonna be alright. Now Abyss obviously is a new huge piece of content with much bigger health pools, with some potential insane roadblocks, no map, no nothing, so it is a bit of a scary piece of content, but I do like it. I'm definitely excited. I can't wait for it to come. Obviously, meanwhile, my opinions and my ideas might change slightly, so do make sure that you catch the live stream when I go in for the first time. You're gonna see which team I ended up using. But it's gonna look something similar to this, I believe. I definitely do think this presents kind of like a good variety of champions with plenty of immunities, plenty of damage output different ways, plenty of different abilities and classes, which is also important, because in Abyss you definitely do not want to be fighting with class disadvantage. And I think that this possibly could be exactly what we need, with some variations. Let me know, what do you guys think? What would you bring? What do you think is going to work out for you? What are your opinions? Perhaps I'm doing something wrong, perhaps I'm missing something. So yeah, basically guys, do let me know, what do you think will be your go-to team, will go-to strategy, or if you're leaving out of it, you can let me know how accurate you expect my predictions to be. But either way, that will do for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya!